Hey, it's Joey Balladonna here from Anthrax, and this is SAGAS.
Well,
Look, this is a big one.
I didn't break out during the podcast today.
It is now time for Devil's Advocate. Same time, same place, awesome. Welcome back, everybody. We're back. This is Corbin, the Serpentine Skipwith.
And this is Ren, the Berserker Marabou. And this is...
SAGAS.
Woo!
Number 21.
Episode what? Oh, 21! Hey, happy days.
We're officially legal age to rock the fuck out. No.
Yeah, legal drinking age.
Yeah. So everyone, drink up. Well, this is any drink, but drink up. So before we start, we just want to give a shout out to Alex Such, the longtime bassist of Bon Jovi, who passed away, I think this week or last week. This whole time I've said stuff like I was never really a big fan of the band, and I'm not going to lie about it. And I'm always honest with deaths, but I mean, who hasn't heard of Bon Jovi? Who wasn't inspired by Bon Jovi? Bon Jovi is one of the biggest bands ever, and the fact that the long time running bassist had to pass, it's just we've lost so many great artists already. So yeah, just rest in peace to him, and best wishes to his family.
Yeah, sad news. It's always sad. Like, how many podcasts have we done already where we have to say it's sad news about, another music man lost? But yeah, that's a sad one now because, I wouldn't be the biggest fan, but I do like their music. And over the years, it's hard to not like, going down a blaze of glory, stuff like that. It's like big anthemic song. So hopefully he went down in a blaze of glory.
Yeah. Now he's living on a prayer.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. So, do you want to do the album? Introduce the album since it's your pick.
Yeah. So, yeah, today I went for Diamond Head. Kind of, let's say, made a lot of noise for the band, but this time I went for the 2006 album. So it's quite an interesting pick why I chose it, but I'll get into all that later on. So what did you find yourself with your first listen, bro?
So, all right. So this was their 2016 release, right? Not 2006.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
as normal, I like to go through what albums came out that year, and it's very interesting because there's some interesting picks like Metallica's "Hardwired to Self-Destruct," which a lot of people consider to be Metallica's comeback album. You got "Dystopia" by Megadeth. You have Baby Metal's "Metal Resistance." What a band! Funny band. Nails, "You Will Never Be One of Us." Covered that. Korn, the Serenity of Suffering. So there was a lot of interesting albums that come out, some good, some bad, but interestingly, the landscape of metal was at a pretty strong point in 2016. And so for these boys to come out sounding the way they did on that album was really interesting. And my first impressions was, it's interesting because I couldn't pinpoint the sound of the album. There was so much going on, so many different varieties, like classic heavy metal, hair metal, rock and roll, blues. There was just so much going on. And that's the first thought I had. I was like, oh, fuck, there's so much going on. I need to dissect it all. And yeah, that was my first thought.
Yeah, sweet, man. I mean, that's it. Like, it really is. I mean, you mentioned Metallica. You can't mention Diamond Head without mentioning Metallica. Am I Evil? Still to this day would be Brian Taylor, the guitarist from Diamond Head's biggest income still to this day for Metallica covering Am I Evil. He still, you know, there's a really cool story going back when Lars Ulrich was a young lad and he was a big fan of Diamond Head, and he flew over from the States to England to see the guys playing. And he was just a young, naive kid, and he was hanging out with the band. And the band took him in, you know, and Brian gave him somewhere. Lars flew back home that week, started a band, Metallica. So, you know, there's a lovely history, you know, surrounding these guys. And obviously, Brian Taylor cannot believe the famous success Metallica. He's seen it from the start. He's seen that rise, and you know, it's amazing the respect that all the guys in the Big Four, say even Megadeth's Dave Mustaine, and obviously James Hetfield and Lars all down. So it's always something that's whenever anybody speaks about them, that's where they go. They go straight to that, because they were one of the main bands in the new wave of British heavy metal. So their career didn't you know, spike up like everybody thought they would, but you know, I think the main thing, the massive successes, their counterparts like Iron Maiden and whatever. But I think, you know, if I have a career as good as this, I will be very, very happy. You know, and they're super humble, super cool, nice, down to earth guys. Now they've had a massive change in personnel from the early 80s to now, and they haven't released that many albums, which is I always found that really interesting why they didn't. I think Brian is more of he's either a perfectionist or he likes to just, you know, play live, and being in the studio is only like secondary to him. A lot of guys prefer being in the studio and creating and stuff. I'm not really sure entirely, but this album, I picked this album because it's one where I think it might be the first album where they have their new singer, Rasmus Bon Anderson. He's a young guy, you know, in comparison to the rest of the boys. I think he's only 37. He's Danish, but he has an absolutely incredible voice that he just stole from what's the guy from Free called again? Bear with me, I have it. The singer of Free, Paul Rogers. He just sounds like Paul Rogers. It's absolutely amazing. It's cool new wave of British heavy metal, but with Paul Rogers style vocals on it, and it's just it's a really cool album, and it just, that's why I picked it, because it's something that it stands out amongst all their amazing albums. But this one, for the vocals, is where I wanted to really get in on. So
yeah, no, you know, that's a good point, Ren. It's like, you know, to me what's interesting is, and I think this is the most critical I've ever been on an album so far, I think. But to me, and I don't want to sound negative, because if I was in a band, or if I was a rapper, or if I was anything in the music industry, I feel like I would do the same thing. But to me, the one thing I didn't like about this band, or at least this album, is that to me it sounds like they're just a combination of different influences without really being their own. And that sounds harsh, but I'm just saying, like, they sound like, because there are certain songs where I hear Sabbath, there are certain songs where I hear Led Zeppelin, there are certain songs where I hear new wave British heavy metal. And it's just like, but to me, they sound like so many of their contemporaries without standing out. And I know, like I said, that's a harsh criticism, because if I was an artist, I'll probably take that road as well. Like, try sound as much as possible as the popular sounds. But yeah, that's the main criticism I had. Is like, when I was listening to it, my mind was too focused on going, oh, Sabbath, oh, Zeppelin, oh, whatever, but without actually without actually going, oh, that's unique. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that, so like I spent more time mentally hearing their influences than I did hearing what they brought to the table as a band, as an original band to you.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. When you hear the new wave of British metal kind of stuff coming through in the songs, for me that's okay because that is something that they helped create, back in the day. But it's funny because they have never really found, as far as I can see, their true sound since back in the day. I mean, they've had three vocalists, ever since they started, and three very, 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 very good vocalists, like world-class singers. Sean Harris was the original vocalist, and he had a certain, like, I don't know, there was a bit more kind of edge to him, his stage presence, the whole lot. I think when he left the band, they lost that not necessarily in the vocal abilities, because then they had Nick Tart. He's very good vocalist, but he just took the band in like a softer direction with his stage presence and even his vocal tone. And then they brought in a younger guy who is, to me, a phenomenal vocalist. But again, he is replicating a lot of the sounds that these boys would have lived through, and he's a young guy and he's trying to bring all this out. So his main thing he can probably do is go back to the resources of what has been before, and he's taken a lot of influences there. But it's funny that you say Sabbath, because Sabbath was actually a big influence on these boys. Well, not boys, these old boys. When they were younger, Sabbath was a big thing, But they have an interesting career, Like, I think it started off in like 1976 when they were in school. Brian started the band with Duncan Scott, who's not in the band now, but then they found Sean Harris, as I spoke about, and from then on it just went from there. I don't know who it was, but one of the guys' mother was a manager of the band and was really helping them make waves. And then they ended up getting a support slot with AC/DC. And I think they supported Iron Maiden and everything then too. So, they've been right back in the thick of it ever since. But I think their journey musically has hit a lot of bumps, and they've never had the time to just find their own sound. But then again, they created a lot of the sounds that we hear today. So it's kind of a funny one. But their album before this was actually produced by a guy who made like Slipknot albums and a couple of the more new metal kind of or modern metal sort of bands. So their last album before this one, what was the name of that one again? It'll come to me. But that was a very different sounding album to this one. And I think this one, they were trying to go back to, maybe the Sean Harris sort of sound, which it's always hard to recreate stuff when you have different members. Even their drummer is a different drummer from them days, although their drummer now, Carl Wilcox, has been in the band since the 90s. And he's a really, really, talented dude, because he's produced a lot of their albums, apart from the one I just mentioned. I'm pretty sure he produced this album as well. But they're signed to, their label is Dissidence Productions. So they kind of opted and chose to go a certain direction, because any bands off this label kind of have that same kind of vein of sound. But yeah, it's interesting that you point that out, all right. And I wanted to see what you thought, actually, because I was going to go back to their 1983 albums or stuff like that, but I thought it'd be interesting to see what you thought of the band where they are now, because they've re-released one of their albums. I think it's called Lightning to the Nation, and I think that was like 89 or something. I can't remember exactly, but they re-recorded it in 2020. So that's got Am I Evil on it, and they actually, Am I Evil, the new version for them, Am I Evil, I'll just check the Spotify, because I remember that is actually doing really well now. So the original has like 434,000 hits, but the re-recording has 2 million. So it's like they're getting to I think they're starting to maybe make the traction that they always wanted. I think with re-releasing some really good old stuff, but with the new production, I think was a clever move. Um, yeah, it's weird. Like I always have a soft spot in my heart for these boys. You know, they're they paved the way. But they never really got what they needed. But Brian Tetley is like a really cool, talented guy. That's he's been fighting for this band since the 70s. You know what I mean? That's a pretty tremendous work ethic, if you ask me. Like, but it's just I think it's the personnel changes over the years, and the label choices I think they've made has them where they are today. So
Yeah.
that's neat.
On a quick side note before I talk about this, is there any bands personally that you can confidently say that you prefer the new singer over? For me, the only choice I can think of is the obvious Joey Belladonna, because he was the second singer. But like, besides that, like, what band can you think of that the singer changes and you prefer their stuff? It's hard. It's like Joey Belladonna is the only example I can think of.
Yeah, it's difficult. That's a hard one. I mean, it's always the hard one to fill. Especially if the singer has made any kind of like iconic waves or pioneered a sound, or it's very, very difficult to step into that role. No matter how good you are, I don't think it's possible, unless you're, a million light years ahead of the other guy. I don't think like Joe something and more attitude. I think that goes a long way as well. But yeah, no, he had like a big shoes to fill with Nick Tart. I mean, Nick Tart's still singing now. He's absolutely phenomenal voice. It's funny. I feel there's an Australian band, Dead Letter Circus, that their vocalist just sounds identical to Nick Tart. So I'd be interested to see if Nick Tart was an influence on him. But what is cool about these guys is it's nice to see the likes of Metallica. They've been on stage with Metallica, a couple of times. There's one big show back in the mid '90s, and they were doing Am I Evil, and to see Sean Harris and Brian Tatler out rocking out with Lars and James, it was very cool. It's nice to see that homage, and that homage is still really strong to this day. Like, so that probably won't ever die out, So whenever anybody, whoever takes the reins after we'll probably try and keep that going. There's a lot of stuff on this album, like it's a Motley Crue melody or a Motley Crue lyric, and even right at the very end of the song, he goes, "Shout at the devil," in that like glam rock kind of style, and it's cool. I really like, because I always liked the original. We were talking about glam rock and metal last week. I always liked the original, or not the original because this isn't the cover, but I like the "Shout at the Devil" by Motley Crue. So when I hear things like that, I don't mind. Like it's like a little homage almost to it, like. So you can kind of see where he's pulling his influences from. But yeah, I don't know. Musically, how you were saying that it reminds you of a lot of stuff, but how do you think they pulled it off? Say they performance wise.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say unfortunately, I feel like this is another look. I'll just say 5% criticism and 95% praise. So the 5% criticism, I feel like it's kind of, and look, only because of when it came out. For 2016, I feel like releasing an album that sounds like the golden era of classic heavy metal could be to their detriment, in the fact that it's 2016. If you're a diehard fan or a core fan like you are to these boys, it's like, I feel like if I was a diehard fan of a band and in 2016 they give me something that sounds just like the 80s or 70s, late 70s, I'll be like, this is cool, but like, can you give me something more? And like, I just feel like that'll be my mentality. But in saying that though, the music that they do produce, it sounds, there were so many times I was listening to this and I completely forgot that this album came out in 2016. Like, they nail it. The vocals are amazing. The guitars are amazing. The whole general aesthetic is amazing. So it definitely brought me back to the nostalgia days, you know, and all the influences that they have, they nail perfectly. It's like you're listening to, like you're listening to a classic album from that era. So I can't fault them for their production. I can't fault them for their instrumentation or their singing. They nail everything. It's just for me, it's like, if considering this band started so long ago, if I was listening to this, like, I mean, if I was a core fan and listened to this, it'd just be like, all right, like, what else can you give me? Which I guess is selfish, and it's a bit, and obviously, most likely there are fans out there who love this style and want them to keep doing it, and there's nothing wrong with that. All the best to them, but I guess because I'm coming from an outside perspective, because I've never heard these guys till now. So it's like, for me, considering everything, considering how long they've been together, you know, the year this was released, all that stuff, it just feels like this is lacking not originality, but lacking something extra to help it stand out. Especially as we started the podcast, we listed all the albums that came out that year. I mean, and so many of them put their stamp on that year, put their stamp on that album. Nails, I mentioned that you were not one of us. That came out that year, and that album blew the fuck out of everything in metal. It's just like they put their stamp on power violence. It's just on punk, and it's just like, I just feel like, I just wish they did the same to help me feel like they stood out, and they're not just recycling the same sounds from the nostalgia era. Which, like I said, I'm not faulting them. If I was an artist, there's no reason to say that I wouldn't do the same thing. So I can't talk, but as a critic, those are just my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it did hit it done quite well in the ratings, you know. But it's funny you say that it sounded, when you know, you get lost in the song, you know, in the sense that you think you're listening to something from the 70s or the early 80s. It doesn't. I think that was possibly the game plan, you know, to write something that sounded like back then. But yeah, I get it. You know, you kind of expect something new maybe on top of that. You know, it was essentially, it was like a really well modernly produced old school, you know, new wave British metal album with like classic rock stuff thrown in, and you know, but yeah, I suppose it depends what kind of mood you're in, what you're looking to listen to at the time. But you know, Metal Hammer gave them 3.5 out of 5, which is pretty decent with Metal Hammer. Hard Rock magazine gave them 8.5 out of 10. So, you know, it done pretty well in that sense. It's funny, like, I don't know, this band breaks me heart as well. Like, it's just one of those bands that just, like, you know, you want to see them rise and rise and rise, but just something always holds them back. But I mean, like I said earlier, though, you know, in the bigger picture of things, you know, they're still a massively successful, massively influential band, and they have so much respect from so many incredible musicians. The track listing is really interesting. There's a Japanese edition. That's the thing. These boys would be big overseas, you know, and they might not have necessarily hit the American market like all the rest of them, but you know, there's quite a substantial amount of the world that they have hit it quite well. So this is the Japanese edition that I'm looking at, and there's 2 extra tracks. There's Kings and Queens and All the Reasons You Live. It's an orchestral mix. So it's just nice to have those additional songs. 11 songs on this album actually feels quite long when you're listening to it, because some of the tracks, you know, the last track is 6 minutes 22 seconds long. There's another track, Number 5, All the Reasons You Live, is 5 minutes 23. So they're good, lengthy songs. You know, I don't think there's any song under, there's one song under 3 minutes. Or, sorry, there's not. There's no songs under 3 minutes. There's one song under 4 minutes, what I was trying to say. So yeah, they've put a lot into this album. And I don't know, I really want to find out exactly who produced this album, because if it was the drummer, he done a great job. He done a really, really good job. But like I said before, he's produced lots of other albums. But yeah, it's one of those albums where there's a couple of songs thrown in where it's they're just straight up rockers. You know, they just got that riff headbanging kind of, you know, just out of the way. But I find the reason why they do that a lot is because they lean on the vocalist Rasmus now, because he's such a technical singer. He's so lyrical. Like, he can sing and swoops and waves, man. He's singing melodies that shouldn't work on a track. You know, I actually had to sit down with one of the songs, and I was like, that's out of key, because it sounds like he's out of key, but it's not. You know, he's just really, really good at manipulating the melodies. It's pure, like, you know, he put it this way: this chap is a year younger than me, and if I was to go and have to sing with Diamond Head, I would be shitting bricks. You know, it's not an easy thing to do. You know, so I've so much respect for him. Like, you know, it's just absolutely killer, and the fact that he's pulling it off and he's singing like he sounds like he's singing from, you know, Woodstock. You know, he's like back in '69. Like, he's just absolutely killer. Like, so overall, the album might not give that impact that, say, the albums that were released around the same time. I totally agree with that. But just as an individual, the band, I think they were going for something in particular, and I think it was a brave step, considering their last album probably would have fit in with the bands that you mentioned that released in 2016. If their last album was released, it probably would have done even better, you know? So, yeah, it was a brave, bold move, and I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, before we get on to this, to the shout outs and stuff, I feel like I've been shitting on this band a bit too much this episode. And sorry, guys, but I will say this in defense to them: as much as I've said about them, and obviously I mean what I say, but if you guys are listening, if any of the band members are listening, you guys are doing 1,001% better than Iron Maiden right now. As far as current times go, you guys have just completely leapfrogged over them in quality and production. So yeah, they may have had their run in the past, but you guys are definitely sounding head over heels better than them. So congratulations to you guys. At least you guys still have your consistency and quality. So that's good. So shout out to you guys for that. Obviously some bands just lose their touch after a while, but you guys haven't. So congratulations to that. So if you want to have any shout outs for this week.
Yeah, this week. Well, I suppose I wouldn't mind shouting out my label and my band, because we announced yesterday that we have a date for our new album, Tales of Ruin. It will be hitting everybody's stores and shores on the 1st of July. So we are absolutely buzzing about this release. Corbin's been shouting at me every week, are you finished? Are you finished? Are you finished? And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm getting there. So and I kind of need that. I need that, like, you know, because I know it's only been a couple of months, but this album took me longer than any other album. I think it might have been our bass player Cass. He was like, you know, take your time with this one. You know, let's not rush this one out. And I was like, yeah, right. So, but unfortunately, I took on what you said a bit too full hearty. Like, I ended up taking longer than I anticipated. So we can blame Cass for it being longer, but it's still pretty quick. Like, so yeah, it's we're looking at 11 songs, but you know me, I'm sitting here last night, and I was like, oh, I might even throw on another track, but I can't now because the date is done. It's all sorted with United Music Mafia and the management team and all. We've all agreed, so it's all go for the 1st of July. Um, but I might throw out like an extra bonus track somewhere along the way. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to shout out today. I'll have quite a few nice announcements next week for different folks, but this week I'm being selfish.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
All right, so start with this. As you all know, my main thing is a reviewer journalist. So I now go on WordPress at serpenttongue94 at wordpress.com. I used to do it on Facebook, but I figured, all the complications surrounding that, I figured I'd have a new domain. So go check that out. All one word, serpenttongue94 at wordpress.com. The link will be in the description anyway. If you need reviews done, there's 2 buttons on there, reviews and contact. If you need a review, contact me. If you want to check out my reviews, do that too. Sometimes I write think pieces, sometimes I write stories. It depends on what I feel like. It's not just reviews, but I love to write, so you'll find a bunch of random shit on there, but mostly reviews. So now we go to Zach. So as we mention every week, and even though he doesn't tell us to, we feel like we want to because he's such a great guy, Zach Moonshine, who just this week, I think, or last week, has proven how good he is once again by apparently being in contact with Cannibal Corpse. Now that is I mean, I'm not really surprised. He's the man. He can, his work ethic's insane. So, yeah, he can help your career in more ways than one. So if you're a band or an artist and you need some good PR work, there's literally no one better to go to but Zach, and you can contact him. The link will be in the description below anyway, but the email. But it's Zach, ZACH, at Metal Devastation Radio, one word.com, and see what he can do for you. I'm going to do a special shout out to Mr. BG Goodrich, who wanted me to give this little message for his group, the local band Smokeout, who, as we heard last week, Ren has some experience with. And, he just wants everyone to know that if you need a reaction or review done, especially if you're a local artist of any genre, we want to hear from you. So that's from BB himself. Again, the only other person who I can put in Zach's category. He's another beast, another workhorse. He's really good for the local community. He's a real stand-up guy. He actually cares. He's passionate. He's like another Zach, pretty much. So yeah, those 2 guys can't be beat. Go to either one of them or go to both, and I'm sure you'll get amazing results from both. And last but not least, the Gas Digital Network. I always feel like I kind of I always make these super long, like the Gas Digital one, but I'm going to keep it short this week. Pretty much, if you're a fan of fucked up and dark comedy, you really can't go anywhere else but the Gas Digital Network. It's a network that has tons and tons of shows on there, different podcasts for you to choose from, all with their own comedy style, their own topics. I personally enjoy the Legion of Skanks, the most offensive podcast on earth. Their words, not mine. They have 3 comedians, 3 different styles of comedy coming together for an hour and a half, roughly, twice a week, one on Zoom, one live, and yeah, they just talk the shit. And I finished watching the latest live one today, actually, and it's as expected. They always don't seem to give a fuck, and that's why I keep coming back. So if you're a fan of that kind of comedy, go check them out. They are hilarious, and they will not let you down. Yeah, and I'm sure Ren can attest to that. He's been hooked on it lately, I think.
Yes, yeah, all good blokes you're talking about there. From Zach to the Smokeout to the Gas Digital Network, it's just all good stuff. I've had my turns, let's say, with all of them. I've worked with, spoke to them, and they're all brilliant lads. So
nice.
My thumbs up all the way.
Well, you know what time it is. It is the time for the great devil himself, Advocate. Awesome. So, who wants to start this week?
As always, bro, you go ahead there.
Oh, it's always okay. So, I'm gonna start with my least favorite track, and yeah, it's pretty funny because like, you know, we created this segment to make the podcast more interesting. But it's not like it's easy for us because we're not reviewing bad albums. We're reviewing good albums, so it's like we actually have to find and nitpick most of the time. So again, this will be just a nitpick again because it's hard to find actually bad songs. My nitpick today is the song Diamonds, and for only one reason, just one reason, and this is why I said the nitpicking. Towards the very end, there's this guitar kind of solo pattern thing where it just sounds super choppy. There's a bit where like notes are played and then just silence, like an abrupt stop, and then and then stop again. But like it's just silence. There's no segue. There's no build into the stop. It's just complete stop, silence, like 3 seconds, music, silence, and I don't know. It just sounded off to me. And to be fair, it's only a few seconds of the song, but that it kind of turned me off a bit, and I was like, it sounds choppy. So for that nitpicking alone, that's my worst. My favorite track is the final track on the standard edition, I think. Silence, which is ironically right after Diamonds. To me, and this is weird for me because, as you know, if you guys have been following the podcast, I'm normally not for songs that change the style up from the majority of the album. Normally, I just prefer the album to stay the way it is. But because this album just sounds like such a mash of different influences to begin with, this last song, Silence, I love the way it changed it up. I love how this was the one song where I heard, oh, this is Diamond Head. This is what they're capable of. And ironically, the first like 10 seconds of the song, the first thing that came to my head, I was like, oh shit, this sounds like Led Zeppelin. It sounded like the song Kashmir. At first, I thought that's what they were going for. I was like, Kashmir, yes. And then it went to this Indian kind of vibe, which was amazing as well. Yeah, so all in all, it had this smooth, really interesting kind of hypnotic almost track, and it kept me engaged the whole 6 minutes plus. So yeah, I loved, and even though obviously after that little intro, the Kashmir influences kind of faded, but still, that intro, I was like, oh shit, they're going for it. And yeah, so I love the intro. I love the Indian inspired, like, kind of deserty vibe. Like, you know, like whenever you watch movies where they're in the desert, that's kind of what sounded the instrumentation they did. So yeah, I loved it all, and it's good that was the outro, because it really made me, because it ended on a good note for me. It ended on a note like, oh, this is what they're capable of. Where I feel like that would have been lost had it have been any other track. So had it have been put anywhere else on the album, I feel like that would have been lost on me. But because it's at the end, I was like, oh, this is what they're like. So
Yeah, bro. It's so funny. The more we talk about music, the more we start to sound alike. You know, they. For me, I'm 50 with you on this week. You know, Diamonds being your least favorite, I totally get that actually, and I did find that kind of that stop and that break at the end a bit unusual. Yeah, so I can understand what you mean by that one. So before I go on to my favorite track, which I think I've made that quite obvious, my least favorite track would be See You Rise. You know, it's like you said at the start, you know, we have to nitpick because we never really review bad albums. Every album we do is a killer album, probably because we have to listen to it in depth, and we don't want to listen to crap, like, so. We pick good albums for each other. And this again, it's an energetic, fast rocker. You know, it's straightforward, a straightforward number, as I call them. Well executed, but it's just it's just a little samey. There's just not enough dynamics and there's not enough depth in the song for me. When I compared it to my favorite track, which is da, 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 big surprise, silence, track number 11. So, you know, I had a few contenders for favorite track though. In fairness, I had Blood on My Hands and All the Reasons Why. I chose them as contenders because all the reasons why has an epic fade in kind of orchestral kind of vibe at the start, and there's just like a great hook. There's a man who bleeds for the reasons you live. That's a really cool hook. I really like that song. It's got the big chunky riffs and epic solo, you know. So that's the Diamond Head that I like listening to, you know. And the same again, Blood on My Hands was another contender because that's got that epic vibe too. And there's a real nice hammer-on verse riff thing, which is, you know, synonymous with Brian. Also, you know, there's just a nice build up around the vocals on that song. Really, really lends to the vocals, which I like his vocals. So yeah, there was a contender, you know. So this one, it was at the end of it, it was a no brainer because this song, like you said, dude, it has that cashmere vibe, man. It's just straight away. That's anything that sounds like that. It's gonna be good, like, and it's not ripping it off or anything. It just has that element of sound to it. It's funny because it starts off with the throat singing, which is a ancient traditional ways of singing or any musicality from ancient times. I love it. But it's funny because the bass line is a little Tool-esque, which is kind of cool. But obviously that's the British way of heavy metal, kind of where Tool would have maybe got inspired by. But yeah, there's loads of cool stuff in that song. There's like big strings, is like it blasts into that cashmere sound like we were talking about. But then there's the Middle Eastern vibe, and that Middle Eastern vibe is my scale. Let's say when I'm writing a song, I especially when I'm doing solos, I work around that Middle Eastern scale. It's just there's a name for it, but I'll just call it Middle Eastern scale. It's the most layered, most dynamic track on the album anyway, and it's the most technical and it's the most diverse. It's just epic and it's emotion. You know, it's just everything that you need in the track. So 50-50 with you this week, bro. Happy days. Great song. Silence.
So how did you guys enjoy that Cannibal Corpse review? Huh? No. I knew it wasn't coming. Well, I already have my pick for the week, and unlike somebody, I'm not going to change it. I won't name names, but the album, which I think is already obvious to you because over text, but the album we're going to do, and I think this is the first time since starting the podcast that I've done a recent review. We're going to do a recent album, and recent, I mean this year. But after listening to it, because the backstory behind this is I actually decided to review this for Metal Blade Records. I got an email to review, and I was like, "Fuck yeah, why not?" So I've actually already written up, but I loved it so much when I listened to it, and I've gone back and listened to it again, and I'm like, you know what, this is because I did have another album in mind, but I was like, you know what, that can wait. This is a new album, I may as well do one for once, because you've done a few already for this year. So this will be my first. So this next week we're going to be doing Remade in Misery by Memphis Mayfire.
Nice.
And, it's a killer. Obviously I don't want to spoil it, but I mean it's a killer album, and I can't wait for us to talk about it because like anyone who's a fan of their music should know that they have probably one of the most underrated discographies. It's like you can't find a horrible album in the discography. So yeah, I'm excited. It's a good album.
Happy days, yeah, that's great. You know, it's nice to mix it up. I haven't listened to Memphis in a while. But like I said to you during the week, man, the album The Hollow was absolutely killer. It was one of my favorites at the time. So I'm very interested to chat about Memphis Mayfire.
Nice. Yep. So that's us this week. Big shout out to United Music Mafia, Mr. Sean. Next week we should be getting a soundbite from the guy to add to the end of this. I've already got it set up, and he's going to send it to me ASAP. So hopefully by next week. And until then, we'll end with our usual same time, same place, or something.
Peace, everybody.